My name is Bob Ferrari. I'm a Senior Cloud Product Manager with Perspecta. On the phone today, I have Craig Stanley from VMware and Brandon Smith from CARAHCAST. Craig, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, Bob. I'm Craig Stanley, and I'm a cloud economist with VMware.
Good morning, good afternoon. Brandon Smythe. I am the VCPP Project Manager for CARAHCAST.
Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. So today we're discussing cloud adoption in public sector space for clients. And in Perspective, we've identified VMware Cloud on AWS as a good first step or a good cloud adoption approach, since a lot of the public sector workloads are already virtualized on VMware. And when we approach clients with that and start talking to them about their cloud adoption journey, we get a lot of feedback on them wanting to go straight to public cloud compute and bypassing the hybrid compute step. And then we also get some feedback saying that VMware Cloud and AWS, when compared to public cloud, is either more costly or maybe an unnecessary middle step. So what we wanted, Craig, I wanted to ask you is, what is VMware seeing in that space, and how do you guys address that question?
Okay. Yeah, we hear that comment frequently, and in some use cases it is true. There are some use cases where moving to VMC on AWS would be a more expensive middle step, particularly environments where the customer may have a huge amount of storage. And those are areas where it's a little bit more of an economic challenge to make a business case. However, typically what we see is that we can show customers through an economic model how in most cases, 80% or so, it's actually less expensive to move workloads to VMC on AWS versus a public cloud and versus an on-prem environment. And a lot of these costs come into play when we start talking about what we like to call blind spots. Blind spots are the costs of other things associated with the workload. So you have to look beyond just the cost of this hardware versus the cost of an instance, for example. We have to also look at the cost of storage, the cost of support, the cost of other software that's required. But the biggest costs that are blind spots are the ones where we have to identify the switching costs: reworking, rehosting, refactoring, retraining, for example.
Okay, so so how does VMware approach like putting that picture together and giving an assessment to their clients so they can see that whole picture? Because we know there's a lot of work involved in adopting native public cloud, and there's a lot of maybe application work and a lot of time involved. So how do we compare and contrast, the costs between the two and what the effort is? What process you guys have there?
Yeah, in our cloud economics team, we actually do have a methodology and a model that lets us do those calculations. So we're able to show what the costs are between an on-prem environment, VMware Cloud on AWS environment, and the public cloud, typical public cloud environment. And we're able to show, look at some assumptions on how much time does it take to refactor or rework an application, how much time is allocated for things like application dependency discovery, a lot of issues like that. So we're able to show, we can actually show how that works out. Would you like to see an example of that?
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's take a look at it.
Okay, this is a version of our model that we use for this analysis called our blind spots calculator. And part of this, it takes some very simple inputs. We make a lot of assumptions, and those assumptions can be adjusted and tweaked as necessary. But in this case, we're looking at, say, 1,000 VMs or workloads that we want to be able to move to a public cloud environment. So we take a look at that number, and we ask how many FTEs, full-time equivalences, are available to be able to do this refactoring. We then make some assumptions with some costing factors. We'll take a look here at what we call our blind spots assumptions. So we're assuming we're going to be moving workloads, we're looking at instances, and in this example, we're going to model a rehost. We can also model a refactor scenario. We look at our standard labor costs, and then we look at the comparisons here between two solutions, VMC and the public cloud, in terms of resources and training. The great thing about VMC on AWS is essentially these are vMotion types of moves. So many customers already have the training and expertise in-house to do the moves. Whereas when we're starting to look at rehosting, there may be some additional training, some additional cost associated with that. And we've represented that here for training costs. The other thing we take a look at is the actual cost of the environment itself. For VMC, it's really all rolled into one price. It's a price per compute hour or per 3-year term, in this case, is what we're using. For the public cloud side, we take a look at the cost of the hourly rate in terms of the Windows rate and a Linux rate. We do that so we can take a look at kind of an average or a balance between the two. And we look at what that cost really comes out to for the compute. We look at the storage. We look at the what we call stack costs. And what this is other software that might be needed in order to make this, make it functionally equivalent to what you would get with a VMC, for example, shared storage. And then we have the ability to show what those costs are. But I think the most important part is really looking at the time from operations. We're looking at how much time does it take to move an application from point A to point B. Now, the default we typically use for public cloud is about 10 hours per application for doing IP readdressing, different changes that have to be made for the hosting environment.
Right, right.
That could be higher, could be lower, but 10's a good starting point, good average for what we see. We look at that and we look at some of the other costs associated with that in terms of time, application discovery, just scope creep, things that just always happen, and error remediation. From the VMC side, we use a value of about 0.2 hours per workload. And we didn't just make that up. That's actually from real customer data. For example, MIT was one of the customers that moved 700 workloads in 9 days. That comes out to about that rate. And it's not that you just have to be really smart people like MIT. We've had a lot of other customers that can also demonstrate being able to move workloads in a similar fashion. This information comes together to give us this simple analysis. So we look at the cost of blind spots in terms of 3 different areas. First is sort of those switching costs, rehosting, reworking, ramp up and migration costs. And we look at what the 2 costs are between the 2 choices. Then we also take a look at those talent and reskilling costs. And one thing to keep in mind is you've got talent and reskilling costs, but in some geographic locations, you may have difficulty actually finding the people to hire to do this work. And then lastly, we look at the actual TCO of the 2 choices, and we have the ability to factor some of these out, for example, if one's more important than the other. In a lot of cases, we do see that when you factor all of these things in, the switching cost as well, that it's much more expensive to go to public cloud directly than it would be to go to VMC on AWS. And then time, as I mentioned, is one of the biggest factors. Looking at time for VMC, we're saying this workload could be moved over, say, in about a month. These 1,000 VMs. Whereas for public cloud native, with 4 FTEs working on this, we're estimating about 2.5 years. Quite a bit of difference in terms of time of getting the workloads moved. And meanwhile, while you're in this 2.5-year period, you're still paying for the on-prem as well.
Yeah.
So one of the things we look at, many times customers will come up and say, well, we've got a deadline. We're coming up to the end of a contract or the end of a lease, and maybe we need to be out of our data center in, say, 6 months. So we'll take a look at simulating what would it cost to move the needle back to 6 months. And in this case, the organization would need to hire an additional 16 people, and that would cost them roughly about $887,000 more to be able to move that needle back to 6 months. So this is how we demonstrate the value of how VMC on AWS can help drive these savings in terms of time and blind spots cost savings.
Yeah, I think this is great because a lot of clients and a lot of accounts that we work with, they don't seem to really understand or really know how to capture that first bullet you have there, that rehosting and reworking and the ramp up and the migration costs and the reskilling as well. And that's really where the lion's share and the long pole of the tent is when you talk about public cloud adoption. It's trying to get there and get there correctly, right? Get there where the workloads are going to run right and make sure that they're all functioning in a cohesive manner and appropriately. So it's really good that you guys can identify what those are, because that tends to be a big question mark when we talk to folks about this.
Absolutely.
Great, this is great. So how would we engage VMware to say maybe have an assessment done for a specific workload?
Well, typically they would work with our account team by contacting the sales account team or with working with any of our partners. This is a service we provide for our account teams and our partners. There's no cost to do these analyses for our customers. And so we'd say work through our partners and our sales teams.
Great. So Craig, working in public sector clients in state, local, and federal, and defense, certain authorizations are required and needed for a lot of different agencies. So can you tell me where we are with VMware Cloud on AWS in terms of FedRAMP authorization?
Sure. VMware Cloud on AWS, we do now have FedRAMP Ready High certification with JAB, right. And we are working toward FedRAMP Agency High, which will be very soon.
Okay, great. And we also know that VMware Cloud on AWS is available today in GovCloud, and it does carry other authorizations such as FIPS and HIPAA and a lot of other ones. So once we get the last FedRAMP box checked, then we're going to be in really good shape. Craig, do you have any white papers or customer success stories that VMware has seen for adoption of this technology?
Yeah, Bob, absolutely. Some of the, let me just go with the white papers. You can go out to cloud.vmware.com/cloud-economics. And we have several white papers that are out there that look at the TCO and the cost savings. From a customer success viewpoint, we've got a few really good ones. The Scottish Government Agricultural Rural Dictate had leveraged the services. They were able to do their migration in under 3 weeks. They discovered that the application costs were reduced by 5 to 6 times. And they were able to have HA during this migration period. Another customer, NSH Digital, they really liked the idea that they didn't have to re-architect, again, any of their applications. So it saved all of that time and cost savings as well. They believe they've got now a faster and more efficient IT. And most important, I think, is they're providing a better patient experience. And then lastly, we have a school system, Westminster Plainsboro Regional School District. They saw a 75% reduction in hardware replacement costs. And the big thing for them was they were able to instantly scale to be able to meet COVID-19 challenges.
Yeah. Those are great examples. And the point that should be lost is that this is not just moving VMware to VMware. You're now in the public cloud when you adopt on AWS, and you could begin to consume public cloud services right then and there. So you could start and then maybe refactor applications over time.
Absolutely. It's a good place to be able to move your workloads to very quickly and almost immediately begin to capitalize on the economies of scale and the savings available through VMware Cloud on AWS.
Thanks a lot, Craig. It's great info. So, Brandon, how would, if somebody wants to adopt this service, how would they go about engaging us?
Fantastic. So if anyone is interested in learning more about the TCO calculator, building it out for your own use case, definitely feel free to reach out to myself, Brandon Smythe, or Leverage, or contact a specialist resource within the resources tab to gain more additional information. We can set up your own meeting.
Great. Well, that does it for me today, guys. Thanks a lot, Craig. Thanks, Brandon. Great info. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Bob, and enjoyed being on your webcast.